Heyo, you're listening to Edge Coach Quip, featuring our very own Edge coaches and community, dropping knowledge nuggets to fuel your day.
Hello everybody, welcome to episode 98 of Coach Quip. I'm Coach Chris.
I'm Coach Robyn.
And today we are talking about training in the heat. Oh my gosh, is there a more relevant topic that we could have right now?
Everyone, it's 90 something outside. We are upstairs in the loft and sweating readily.
Yes, so we figured it is time to cover this topic because as people are doing their training throughout the summer, this is a serious concern, and it is also something that unfortunately, increasingly, depending on where you live in the country, you're going to face this a lot more, and maybe for a lot longer. And so we really need to understand, how do we train in the heat? So to kick us off, in hot weather, your body has to work a lot harder to regulate your temperature and to regulate the stress. It causes increased stress on your cardiovascular system. So the big quip here, the key point, is slow down your runs.
Slow them down. Scale your efforts.
All right, so when you're thinking about the way that you should scale your runs in the heat, the first thing that we need to be thinking about really is the heat index and the humidity. So the heat index is that combination of temperature and humidity, and that's what can really affect your body's ability to cool down. So higher humidity really makes it harder for your sweat to evaporate off your body, which then makes your body feel hotter, and it impairs your body's ability to cool itself.
Which is why you feel terrible running in really humid conditions.
Yes.
So, it's always interesting, we get this question a lot of, how much does it impact and how much should I scale? There are some really, really great calculators out there that help you take into account temperature and humidity. The big rule here is to always, always, always go on effort, right? So if a 9-minute pace is feeling a lot more like an 8-minute effort, scale by a whole minute, go for it. Some general kind of nuggets to have in your mind is if it's even 60, 70 degrees, let's say 70 degrees, we have some calculators that say that's 6 to 7% increase on your pace, and it starts to go up exponentially. So at 80 degrees, we're looking at 12 to 15% increase on pace, and at 85 degrees and up, especially if you have not been practicing in it, we're looking at an 18 to 20, sometimes 20+% increase on pace. I would say that we saw this at Chicago Half Marathon in early June, where we had this huge spike, and people were pretty close, going into it to hit PRs, and then on race day, it was just everything had to be scaled because it got up to 85 degrees on that day.
And these numbers are the heat index, or this
it's
is
combined.
Straight up
it's combined, yeah. So it's whatever that real feel is. Can really, even if it's 70 degrees with high humidity, and let's say that real feel is, in the low 80s, you're looking at that, maybe even 15% increase in pace.
Yeah, so every weather app should have the real feel temperature on it, which is that combination of the heat index, is the heat index, it's the combination of the humidity and the temperature, and that's really the one that you want to look at. But you also should remember that being in this direct sunlight is gonna play a role in how you feel. And just the humidity in general, just knowing how it feels like running through
soup.
Yeah, running through soup. And so those are all things that you're going to want to take into consideration.
All right, so slow it down, scale the effort. That's your quip. Coming up in the bonus miles, we've got 5 key tips in dealing with running in the heat. Stay tuned. All right, to these tips, right? We're kind of at the beginning of summer, but we're feeling it today in full force, low 90s right now, which is why we look like we're melting. Number 1 is hydration is key. So water is your friend. We really cannot say this enough, that proper hydration before, during, and after any type of activity is crucial. Drinking a ton of water throughout the day, as well as during the runs, is going to help you thermoregulate. You are going to burn through, just like if you have a fever, right? They say hydrate because your body is burning through extra fluids trying to thermoregulate. It's the exact same when you are trying to manage being out in the heat. So things that you can do to make sure that you have a lot of hydration is carrying a water bottle with you, like we are holding up right now. Planning your routes near water stops. So knowing, like on the lakefront path or on the 606, we know where the water is so that if you're not going to carry it, it's there. You can also loop, create loops of your own if you need to. I love when I'm on trail, I plant and carefully pack with ice a little cooler, and then that way on my loops, I know that I automatically have something to come back to. And sometimes I'll even put like fun things like Coca-Cola in it, and I know that it's cold and it just calls to my soul. So creating those loops. On that note though, of also what to drink, much better than Coke is going to be something that has an electrolyte rich component to it. So whether that's something that you can get, at a grocery store like Gatorade, or something that you can get here at Edge like Morten or Noon, something that has a lot of electrolytes, because you are going to be bleeding these out at an accelerated rate when you are even walking around in the heat. Your body, again, to thermoregulate, burns through a lot of electrolytes, so we want to increase those both before, during, and after your sessions.
Yeah, if you start to get a headache, this is probably a good sign that you need electrolytes. That's like a number one sign. And there are plenty of signs of heat stroke, heat exhaustion that you should be looking out for. Hydration will help you keep some of those at bay. The second thing that you should be thinking about in terms of dealing with the heat is timing your runs appropriately. So you will see some 6 a.m. starts coming up here on our long run efforts, trying to beat that heat. Timing your runs in the early morning or late at night, closer to when the sun is going down, is a good way to avoid that peak sun. We always want to stay out of peak sun. If you can only get your workout in at the noon hour and it is a hot and humid, high heat index day, I think it's better to hit the treadmill than to go outside and fry.
It's certainly a better science experiment. You're getting better data.
Yeah.
It's a better actual example of your fitness versus just going outside and suffering.
Right, and you can also find shaded paths. So if you do have to do a run that's a little bit closer, a little bit, the sun is up already, let's say, and not that high noon hour, but kind of early morning or late afternoon, if you can find a shaded path, you'll be a little bit better off. It's still going to be hot though. You still have to take into consideration that slowing of paces, even if you're in the shade.
Absolutely. To your point on timing your runs, it reminds me like when I started getting into longer distance running, and you obviously have to be in a place where you feel safe doing this, but one of my favorite times to run is actually at sunset. Mm-hmm. So I would start my warm up as the sun was starting to go down, and as I eased into my harder paces, it was getting darker and darker, and usually the wind kicks up. They were some of my favorite all-time runs because I felt so powerful being able to do more work as it cooled off, and my body temperature was rising, but it was actually cooling around me, and that will always be my favorite time to run for that reason.
It sounds amazing. I love sunrise runs for that same reason. Well, probably more sunset runs now, as I like to sleep in. but safety, you mentioned safety, so it's important to stay safe on your runs, obviously. We'll do an episode about staying safe on the run sometime in the future. But for now, thinking back to our last episode about pace groups, this is a great opportunity, as it's getting hotter and you need to hit those either early morning or late night runs. In order to stay safe, pacing, joining up with your pace group people and having safety in numbers is a great idea.
Absolutely. All right, next tip, we've got dressing appropriately. Honestly, it does kind of all come down to your gear. You know that when I work out, I do not like wearing a lot of clothes. Like I get very, very hot. I become like a little inferno, which is the complete opposite of if I'm sitting still. So I have to choose my clothes very, very wisely. Like if I even wear like too long of a short, I'm hot. So things you can do. Choosing lightweight, moisture-wicking, breathable clothing. I love things that have even like perforations in them, making sure that I have a tank on so that my armpits can cool, right? And that's a huge, huge, huge piece for me to stay cooler. And Chris is dressed like this today for sure. Lighter color clothes. I know that some blacks don't like absorb and be super, super hot like we probably growing up we're used to, but it still does help to have lighter color clothing throughout.
This is not an ideal running outfit.
Don't go outside today. It's a terrible outfit if you're watching us on YouTube. And then wearing a hat or visor, I personally really love. I like to make it a little bit lighter color as well so that my head isn't getting hot. It's also going to provide some additional protection from the sun. I was told recently by a dermatologist that they were surprised that I don't have more sun damage because I'm in my 40s and I've been outside doing outside things my whole life. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it comes down to me not wanting to like squint a ton and wearing a hat all the time. The byproduct is, hey, protect your skin too. And then last but not least is in ice. use ice in your clothing when you can. So putting, they have bandanas that you can like stuff it in, or having a towel or something on you that can be wet and cold. You can tie it to your neck, you can hold it in your hands. It makes a big, big, big difference being able to keep you a little bit cooler so your body doesn't have to work quite as hard.
Yeah, I love the good ice bag or a sponge under the hat.
Yeah.
That is a really good one.
Absolutely.
All right, so the next tip for running in the heat is to gradually acclimate to running in the heat. Kind of sounds pretty simple, but I think that the spring season into the first hot runs of summer are so incredibly brutal because we're not used to running in that sort of weather. If you've been layering on clothes and running outside or sticking to the treadmill for the spring and the winter and the fall maybe too, getting back outside is really important. If you're racing a summer race or a late fall race, you're going to want to get outside and practice in those conditions. It doesn't have to be every run because, as we're talking about, if having to scale your pace on speed workouts means that some of your speed workouts might actually be better done on a treadmill depending on where you're at in your season. But it's really important to get that heat exposure and to start to generally acclimate to how your body will feel when you're out there putting in an effort.
So I am known for really sucking in the heat. Like really terrible, to the point where I have named my heat monster Henry the Heat Monster, and I think about him all the time. I will say at the beginning of the season, like of any summer season, he is large and in charge and I have to combat him a lot. But by running in the heat more, particularly easy runs, I adapt fastest with. Then by the end of the summer, he's somehow behind me and I can tamp him down. And it's fun sometimes to think of it that way. I'm like, yes, I beat Henry down. Yeah, let's go.
And that's a great way to do it. So if you're looking at your weekly schedule, you're not going to want to go and blast out a tempo run in the high humidity, high heat days. Those easy runs are the spot to get that general acclimation, to build your resistance to the heat or your comfort in the heat, I guess.
Last but not least, listening to your body.
Yes, pay close attention to how you're feeling on your runs. We talked in the first part about how you'll scale your pace card, but in some of these workouts, it's best to just go by feel. Your perceived effort, at a certain point in your training what a tempo run should feel like, and you can basically just flip that watch around and search for that effort level within yourself on those hot days, especially the super hot ones that are going to, bump your paces off about 20%.
Your coaches don't care. They want you to be safe. They want you to feel strong and go by effort in those instances. So if you are worried about like, oh man, am I supposed to do this exactly as written? The answer is no. Do it to effort.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes for any extreme conditions. Coaches do not want you out there in extreme storms, in smoky conditions like we just recently experienced across the country. These are things that we are going to, unfortunately, have to be dealing with more and more probably in our future. And as coaches, we want you to be safe. No one run is worth you'll never get the training adaptations from one run that will offset your exposure to those conditions and the way that might hurt your body, not just on that day, but also long term and for the course of your training cycle.
Number one thing is if you start to experience some weird symptoms in your training in the heat and you start getting dizzy or nauseous or being extremely fatigued and lethargic or super rapid heart rate that you can't get under control, just stop. So this could be heat exhaustion, it could be heat stroke. In those cases, we want you to stop running, find shade, figure out how to get cool. Getting an air conditioning is really great, and start to hydrate. If it gets worse, you're going to, of course, seek some medical attention. So those are things that we just don't want to mess around with, and you just need to listen to your body.
We always want you to be your own best coach in those situations. Again, we would rather have you not complete a workout than to push through and suffer, physically.
All right, to recap our 5 tips. Number 1 is going to be hydrate before, during, after. Don't forget those electrolytes.
Number 2, time those runs wisely. Hit those early morning or as the sun goes down hours as it's safe. And if you have to do midday runs, get inside.
Number 3 is going to be dress appropriately. Nice, light, breathable clothing. Try to go light. Basically, everything I'm wearing right now, don't wear it.
Tip number 4, acclimate slowly to the heat. Get out there on those easy runs and increase your exposure over time.
And number 5, listen to your body. Pay some close attention to how it feels. If you start getting a little wonky, stop, cool down, hydrate.
All right, those are your tips for running in the heat. Stay cool out there, but stay consistent, make good choices, and we'll see you next time.
Later.
Thanks for listening to Coach Quip. Original music performed by Mend. Follow us online on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Edge Athlete Lounge. Our podcast lives in the blog section of our website. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and you can check out the show notes for additional ways to contact us. Ready, set, onward we go.